Hi, welcome back to another episode of Anyone Can Paint. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. We finished getting the highlights of the trees, and we're not blocking now the buildings. This is going to be just some blue and brown. You can go half and half if you like. Just kind of stir it up. You don't have to have one flat color. And I've got my number 3 brush, flat bristle brush. And this is where you're going to paint over some of the edges of the trees and things, so you kind of sit back a little bit. Let me slide this in here. There we go. We'll get the roof in first. Then the building. Just reloading. And then there's another small building. Comes off to the side over here. That's got an angle. And that's the roof to that. And the bees back. Again, you're just going to block this in with the dark color, so when we put the highlights on it, you can kind of take advantage of the dark sometimes. We're going to go over to the other side, and I believe that Lighthouse Bob called this building, which is attached to the lighthouse, the dog house, I believe is what he called it. And this is actually just a storage building. And again, this is right up against the lighthouse. Just reload and I'll be right back. Again, we'll separate all this out with the highlights and the roof and the side of the building and the colors and all that kind of stuff. We'll give that a chance to dry. And we'll clean out that brush. Next thing we're going to do is, now that the underpainting for the lighthouse is dry, we're going to go in and start putting highlights on that. And I'm going to use my number 5 flat bristle brush. And we're basically going to use white with this, again, to kind of accent the sunlight coming in. So we're going to use just some straight white. I'm just going to pull that out and get it to a chiseled edge. And then we're going to go right along the left-hand side of the lighthouse. Now we're going to do this in a couple steps, because this white will not maintain its brightness very well. So we're going to have to come in and hit it again. And then you just want to work it back towards the shadow side. But you don't want to cover up all the dark. Just reloading with some more white and continuing to work down the left-hand side of the base of the lighthouse. Again, just going to soften that edge up a little bit. And again, this is a bit of a process, so kind of hang with me a little bit. Just going to soften that side up. I'm going to come grab more white, reload. We're going to stay right back on the left-hand side, because again, that's the bright side. And just kind of work this back. Block this in. And just kind of lightly, see, I'm not even loading the brush, so you don't have a lot of paint left on your brush. And that's how you can just lightly start working it back, because you're really not putting a great deal of paint on it. And then we're going to go up to this next section. Same thing with white. I'm going to stay on the sunlit side first. Grabbing more paint, just reloading the brush. I'll be right back. kind of work that. Is that darn bee again? Now I'm going to get this edge a lot better here soon. I'm going to go up to the next section. And because of the angle that we're on, these sections, the tops of those, are going to have a slight little arc to them because of how we're looking at it. So they're not going to be straight across. Again, I'm going to separate these sections out when we go to put the details to it. And this little section below the glass has got some weight on it. Soften that side a little bit. All right, now I'm going to turn this on its side so I can get a nice clean horizontal stroke. Again, I'm loading it up with more white chiseled edge. And you'll see, just kind of like yellow is, when you put another layer of white on white, it starts to retain its brightness a little better. And then I'm going to pull that down so you kind of get that feel of it being round. And you've got to do this while that paint is still wet, or else you won't be able to pull anything back. I'm just reloading, coming right back up. Again, pulling that back. I'm going to continue to work down the edge. Reload, and I'll be right back again. It's really important that when you do this that you've got a lot of paint and you have a chiseled edge, and that's how you're going to be able to retain that nice crisp edge on that. Pull this back. And you may have to do this a few times, so don't get discouraged. It's just part of the process. Grabbing again more white and just continuing to work down. And then pulling that around. And I'm just softening all these edges here. We're going to put a little bit lighter color on the shadow side. And that's how we're going to work that into our highlight side. All right. Well, let me get this little section up here while I got this. And again, we're going to separate out these sections because there's a series of railings that go around that, and you'll clearly see the definition between each of those. Let's go ahead and clean out that brush. Now we're going to go to my number 1 flat bristle brush. Remember, before you start painting with the brush, you want to make sure you get it wet and towel dry it off. Now we're going to underpaint the top of this. This part in here is actually the shadow, the back side of the dome. That's this part here. Again, because of the angle that we're on, you can actually see the underside of that. That's inside of the lighthouse itself. So I'm going to use white, a little bit of brown, or I'm sorry, blue. And I'm going to paint right over this area here. And that's going to become a grayish color. And then I'm going to clean out the brush. And on top of that is a reddish brown. We're just going to block this in with some brown first. This is going to be the underpainting. And there's a little bit of a shape to it. It's just not a half circle. All right, while we're kind of letting this dry and set up, why don't we take a break and we'll go back and visit with Lighthouse Bob, and he'll give you a little bit more history about the lighthouse. All right, Bob, you talked a little earlier about the structure of the lighthouse. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk about the light. Now, I'm sure that light has been changed out with technology improvements through the years, probably.
We've gone through. There's some question about the early light. They had a gentleman involved in the lighthouse service for quite some time. He was a friend of Mr. Hamilton, who was the secretary. No, not Hamilton. Anyway, friend of the Secretary of the Treasury. And the lighthouse's service originally was under the Treasury Department. And he fancied himself quite a developer of lights and so forth. So they had a light up there. Winslow Lewis was his name. And they had a light up there that he developed. And then, of course, it was changed 2 or 3 times. And finally, in 1931, we got electricity up here. And the first electric light was nothing but a 14-inch searchlight. It sat out there on the gallery, bolted to the side of the tower. In fact, the bolts that held it are still sticking out of the wall up there. And that was there until 1950. In 1950, in the meantime, of course, they had a Fresnel lens in the tower. And the original one was what they called a third order. These lights came in 6 different sizes. First order was the largest, and the second, and the third, and at one time they had a 3.5, supposedly that was developed just for the Great Lakes. I've never seen one. But then they had a 4 and a 5 and a 6, and the 6 was, we have one in the museum. You can carry it around.
Oh.
But we had a 4th order here, and it wasn't large enough, so they said, well, we better get a 3rd order. They took the 4th order out and they transferred it to the Saginaw River light, and they put this 3rd order in here, and when they got it in here, it wouldn't fit. They actually had to cut the floor out of the lamp room up there, and so the lens dropped about a foot through the floor, and then it all sat on the post, and then they decided that it should be a flashing light. And in order to make it flash, they built panels. And the panels were about 4 feet high and about 2 feet wide. There was 2 of them. And the brackets came down, and they were on a gear on the lower side of the light, and they rotated around the light so that you got the flash pattern. And those panels, they were controlled by what they called a clock. And it worked like the old grandfather clock. The weight, you pull the weight up, and then the weight coming down ran the clock, and that turned those panels around the thing. And we've still, the channel that the clock weight came down through is still in the tower there. Of course, and the other problem that they had in those days was the kerosene lamps they had only lasted for 4 hours. So every 4 hours, the keeper had to go up there and literally change the lamps, because the lamps were get so hot inside of that lens that you couldn't refuel them. You had to set them aside to cool. There's a cabinet in the tower up there where you could set the lamps to cool, and they just put another one in place of it.
And they just rotate those out.
Yeah, and the wicks in those were 1.5 inches in diameter, 1.25 inches in diameter. And of course, the keepers in those days, they were called wickies, because part of their job, every time they shut that lamp down, before they reset it up there, they had to trim that wick and cut it so it was perfectly straight, so you got the best light from it. Well, when they put that clock in there, and to turn those panels, and this was the question on my mind for the longest time, because when you go into the tower here, the shaft that the clock weight came down on the side didn't come all the way down. So we got a school teacher in here, a math teacher one day, and he's looking at that, and he says, well, he says, you got 4 hours. They timed that clock weight to match the lamp, so when he went up to change the lamp, he would wind the clock. I have one of the weights in there that weighs 170 pounds, cast iron, and it was on a cable that came down through this shaft. But every 4 hours you had to wind that, and those clocks didn't have a reduction gear on them. It was just crank that thing. So that's that went on, of course, until, like I say, till 1931. They got the electricity, and then in 1950, they had, in the meantime, of course, during World War II, they used that tower as a lookout post. They couldn't trust the Canadians.
What are you going to do?
So they got all their equipment out of there. They took the light out, and then they brought in 1950, they brought in a 24-inch aerotype beacon that rotated 360 degrees. And at some point, and that's something that I haven't been able to find out for sure, where the factory is over here behind the station used to be a railroad yard.
Okay.
And the headlights on the locomotives would shine out into the lake as they came up through the yard. And the ships would be coming down out of the lake, and they'd see a light, and they thought, oh, there's Fort Gratiot, we made it. But then that light moved, or it disappeared completely.
Yeah.
So they said they got to do something about that, so they changed the light to green. It's been green ever since. It'll probably be green as long as the lighthouse is in existence. But then about a year and a half ago, this 24-inch light quit working. And of course, they had trained me to take care of that light, to change the lamps, and that one went out. But periodically the Coast Guard came up and did service on it, and a guy came up from Detroit to work on the light. It went out, and he worked on it all day and couldn't get it working. He says, I ordered you a new light. But when he came with the new light, he's got it under his arm in a box. And it's a little bit bigger than a 5-gallon bucket when it's put together. It's all plastic. The lamp in it is about as big as your finger, and it has a longer range than the old lights that it had in the 24-inch. And the lamps in those were like a Coke bottle. So,
isn't that amazing?
It's wild. I couldn't comprehend it for a while, but I lived down by the lightship, and I used to come out at night and look to make sure the light was working. Excuse me. So today we got that light up there with the small lamp in it, and it works. And of course, they have in there now what they call a lamp changer. It's got 6 lamps in it. The one burns out, it kicks over to the next one.
Automatically.
Automatically.
Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that with Lighthouse Bob. I told you earlier, he's got a real passion for that lighthouse, and I hope that kind of comes through. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start putting the highlights on our buildings. This building is part of a pretty large building. It's a 2-story, actually it was a home where the lighthouse keepers lived. So we're going to start with the roof first, and I've put some red out on my palette. And this is going to be some red with a little bit of the burnt sienna in it. And maybe just a small touch of some blue. And that will kind of get it to a crimson type color. And this is going to go right over the roof. Just kind of block that in. And again, it's okay to have some of the underpainting showing through. The roof on this building is the same color. And this is the one that kind of sticks out. You see a little bit of it that's back tucked around the corner of this larger building. And that comes across. And then the side of this building is going to cut that off. So you just want to take this straight down, and you can block that in. And the roof on the doghouse is basically the same color. I'm just going to add a little bit more burnt sienna to it, and maybe a touch more blue. And we'll block this in. And while I've got it, I'm going to hit this dome with this color because that's basically what that same color is. And we can knock that out. Now on the very top, I've got to switch brushes. there's a little bit of a ball, and there's like probably like a lightning rod that goes off the top of that. So I'm using my #1 script liner brush, adding water to that color, because remember, with a liner brush you've got to thin that paint down. And then on the very top is a little ball, and it's got some design to it, but in order to kind of keep this simple, let's make this basically a simple little shape. Just reloading the brush. And then I'm just reloading, getting a nice little sharp edge to do that little lightning rod that's off the top of an antenna or whatever that is. Just like that. And we can clean that out. Next thing we're going to do is, since I got the liner brush out, we're going to go through and start making the railings and things that go on the top edges of some of these stages at the lighthouse. As it starts to go up, it changes shapes and dimensions and things. So this is going to be a pretty dark color. This is mostly blue, a little bit of brown. Chiseled edge again. Now, the first set of railings happen right here, which is the section right below where the lighthouse part, or the light is at. So this kind of comes down like that, right on top of that, on the outside edge. And then there's a top railing. Remember, you need to keep that same profile with a little bit of an arc to this shape because of the angle that we're looking at. Wasn't loaded very well. There we go. And then there's going to be the support railings that come down. And these are just basically vertical strokes. And I'm going to gray this color up a little bit, and I'm going to make the indication of this separation right here. There. All right, I'm going to go back to that dark color. We're going to go up to the next level, and there's a railing that goes around the actual light part of the lighthouse. That's going to go there. That goes there. And this goes right across. Like that. And then again, you're going to pull down some of the support pieces. Again, these are just vertical strokes. And I'm going to clean that out. I'm going to go back into white, and I'm going to clean up that bottom edge. And see, again, this is the nice thing about acrylics, is that part has dried. You can paint right over it. And it's not a big deal. There. Now the pieces that are on the light section itself, this is painted white. So I'm staying with the same brush, and I'm just going to go over those. Now this is where we're going to push the back side of this dome back, is because what you want to do is that what we're painting is on this side of that light beacon. So these need to come down in front of those. You can probably hear some boats off into the distance there. And boy, there is another big old ship. Alrighty, while I got that on there, I'm going to add some of that dark to make this a gray color. And I just want to give an indication of, where they did this addition to where, from the taper to where it goes horizontal, there's a bit of an indication there. So we're just going to suggest that also. Let me get a little bit more paint on my brush. Kind of like that. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my number 5 flat bristle brush, and we're going to again kind of hit this again with some white to brighten it up. That'll be probably our last time that we do that. Again, chiseled edge on the side and then pull it back. Just kind of keep working down. You'll see when you do this this step how it tends to retain a little bit more of that brightness. And here comes the waves. Alrighty, this is probably going to be as far as we get this week. Thank you again so much for watching. We really appreciate that. You can do this, I'm promising you.